Welcome to the Warband, a World of Warcraft podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Swaglock, and with me today is our illustrious co-host, Chicken.
Do you smell that?
No, I did have a rotisserie chicken earlier from Costco, if that's what you're asking about.
It smells like up dog.
What's up, dog?
What is up, dog? Oh wait,
I'm sorry. I want to apologize. I want to apologize to our listeners because I knew exactly where that was going, and
you didn't. No, you didn't.
As soon as you smell up dog, I was like,
you knew
I have to go with the bit. I have to go with the
dog. Hey, how's it going? Doing pretty good.
Good, dude. What have you been up to this week?
So I know I touched on this last podcast. Been having a lot of stuff to do around the house. I take some time off between Christmas and New Year's Day. And then we had the couple days after New Year's Day off and going back to work next week. So I've really been grinding WoW, doing some stuff around the house, hanging out with the family,
Dude, that's fun.
And everything.
Yeah, man.
It's been pretty good. I've been really grinding out those portals, dude. I got 3 left.
Okay, which 3 you have?
I need
Stonevault still?
What was that?
You still need Stonevault?
No, I did Stonevault by myself, bro. I wasn't even going to ask you. I was like, I'm not even going to ask him to help me. I tanked it, and we actually timed it surprisingly, even though for some reason people don't understand what lust on the first pack means.
Yeah, you got lust, especially if you're pulling all of it. If you're pulling that whole pack, you got lust, and then that gets your lust up for later fights a lot quicker.
Dude, and that was the thing. Like, and we all wiped, and this is a lesson, actually. This was a huge lesson because at that point I was about to just leave because I don't think it was my key. I think it was someone else's key, and I was literally just about to be like, okay, well, this dungeon's toast. We all just wiped on the first pack because this guy didn't even lust, and we ended up timing it. I was really surprised.
Listen, sometimes it's worth it to keep the key going, especially nowadays with the better drops for crests. Dude, I was so upset this week. I was running Mist. It was a Mist of Tyrannus Scythe. And I'm gonna be honest, it was going rough. Wasn't the end of the world rough, but it was just rough. Mm-hmm. Let me clarify, I was doing good though. I've been practicing Brewmaster Monk. I've been getting pretty good at Brewmaster Monk. So it wasn't really my fault. At least I'm gonna say it wasn't my fault. It's going well. And then right before, we're going to the last boss, and I think we wiped on the last boss. Just one wipe on the last boss. The healer started yelling at the warlock about something. I don't know what was going on. He starts yelling at the warlock, and then the healer just disconnects. And I'm like, what is the point of that? This is not the hardest boss in the dungeon, right?
Which one was it?
It was the last boss, the third one, the big bug guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
probably
especially
the easiest, actually.
Yeah, especially when I'm tanking. Well, I think the first boss is probably the easiest. But when I'm tanking, I just kite him. I just kite him in a circle around the area. So your goo drops on the ground aren't even that bad. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, we're on the last boss. You probably would have gotten. I think this was a 10, right? I think it was a 10 or something. So we probably would have gotten 10 crests or whatever.
12, actually.
12 crests for not timing it.
If you don't time it, you get a 12. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So 12 crests, which is almost enough to upgrade 1 piece of gear. That's very generous. I think that's what you got before for timing it. Right?
Yeah. It's exactly what you got before for timing it.
and so I'm like, what? Why? What is the point? Now I would have understand if the dude was just like, hey guys, I'm really sorry. I only had this much time. I thought we could do it. I literally have to go. I gotta go to work or whatever else. You know what, bro? You probably shouldn't have queued into a key with only 35 minutes. Hot take.
Yeah.
Queuing the key,
that's
right?
not a hot take.
Give yourself 40. Give yourself a solid 40 minutes, right? It's manners. You're saying I'm gonna help you out with, and that's something that bothers me, by the way. When you say, I'm going to help this person out with their key, even if you want to get that rating, even if you want to get time, even if you have selfish reasons for going in, which we all do, right? When we do keys, we have things that we want from that key, unless it's just to help a friend out. However, when you say, hey, invite me to your group, you're also saying, hey, I'm going to see this through to the end so long as it's reasonable. And in my mind, that was reasonable. I think we were like 1 minute over time. We wiped on the last boss. Let's just go back. Let's just do it again. We're going to kill him this time. No problem.
Yeah, that's pretty dang reasonable to me. Yeah, it sounds like they probably just, what was it from Ragnaros?
Close. It was Quel'Thalas, which like I've heard, you know, I don't want to come across like odd. I think I should clarify. I always make a joke that like I don't do dungeons with rag players, and it comes from I think it's maybe like just a cultural difference because they are South American servers. So I think there's a cultural difference. There might be like a limitation on the amount of time that they have access to the internet or something like that. Or I've heard some of them play on like internet cafe computers, and so they like literally they're paying for their time to play. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what I've heard. All I know anecdotally from personal experience, like I don't care about language barriers, language barriers or whatever, right? Like there's really not that much communication that has to happen. Plus, based on the way he was, you know, yelling at this warlock, there was no language barrier there. I just find that in the groups I've been in, they're usually the first to like yell at me, get really angry, and especially like leave, right? The first to leave, first to yell at me. And that's just anecdotal. That's just like personal experience. So I think, right? Yeah, I do think it's interesting. Some servers just have cultural differences, like, and not even like because of regional. Like, just some servers, just the player bases behave differently. I think it's a little bit less obvious now than maybe it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, especially when like servers were very contained, and now you can play across servers, but you still see it. I think, and I don't know if there's other people would share this sentiment, like Moonguard players, for example. Obviously, you know, there's kind of like a little bit of a connotation. Moonguard players can be a little odd sometimes, okay?
A little odd. The
Goldshire Inn. I will admit, I've been on Moonguard, and I've gone down the Deep Run tram, and it was the worst experience of my entire life. The things that popped up in my chat window will haunt me till the day I die. With that said, though, I find that they're often very nice and very encouraging in dungeons, because for a lot of them, they're playing WoW for the social experience and the relational experience and the community, right? And so they're not going like, oh no, this key's 1 minute over. This warlock's the worst human being on the entire planet. They need to know that their mom dislikes them. You know, they're like, oh wow, this guy's learning. He's grown. He made a mistake. That's okay. So I find that there's different
come over to my house.
Different cultural. And I say cultural, but I mean cultural to that server, right? Like the servers themselves have their own identity and their own just like vibe to them, which is a very unique part of World of Warcraft. It's one thing I like about, we play on Stormrage, and I find I really enjoy the people on Stormrage. I like the community that's around that server.
Yeah, people are pretty nice. Real quick, what do you think Moonguard's going to be like when they have player housing? I
think they're going to love it. I think they're going to love it. I think maybe love, multiple ways you could use that word. However,
oh my.
I think part of what makes Moonguard so fun for people, though, is the communal part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so player housing will probably maybe help hide away some of that oddities, the things that maybe you don't want to see out in the world. But I think a lot of the social stuff, right? The reason why the people hang around the Goldshire Inn is because it just feels, it's fun when you look around. There's tons of people around, right? Like they're all interacting with each other. There's something to that. There's something exciting
MMO,
about that,
right?
Yeah, and especially Goldshire being historically a role play server. A lot of them want that human interaction, that relational interaction. Speaking of which, did you ever watch that documentary?
Which one?
The Ibelin one on Netflix.
No, I never did. No.
Dude, okay, yeah, dude. This week at some point, even if you're just like working around the house and have it on the background or something, I like definitely suggest watching it. Like, it is super good. I was crying the whole time. I'm like cleaning up my apartment watching. I'm like crying while watching it. And then my fiance texted me and she's like, I got home and my parents are watching it now. And so like they liked it. They know nothing about World of Warcraft at all. They didn't even realize that was the game that I play all the time, make a podcast about, make videos about, live stream, right? Like, they didn't know. They just were like, oh, Netflix documentary about a guy. Let's watch it. But it's actually genuinely really good.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out my Netflix situation first, and then maybe I'll try to.
That's fair.
Try to get on that, but yeah, it's. I mean, we've said this before. It's an MMO, right? Come on.
Yeah, you're playing with people.
We're playing with other people. You got to interact with other people, but sometimes people are just jerks.
Yeah, and
I've played with tons of jerks, dude.
And that's the nature of playing with people, right? Like, people are people, and sometimes they're great, and sometimes they're not so great. Sometimes people can be very healing in your life, and sometimes they can be very damaging in your life. And it's finding the right people to game with, and building those communities around you. I think that make World of Warcraft such an interesting experience, because I do, like, and I think you've seen, like, I've seen comments on videos I've posted, I've seen comments on Twitter and elsewhere of people that are just like, oh, players in WoW are the worst, it's so toxic, I hate it in there. And I think some of that comes from the competitive content of WoW, and I think that's the nature of competitive content. Listen, if you want M+, if you want mythic rating, if you want content that is deeply challenging, and challenging in the way that almost pits you against other players in trying to succeed or trying to raise your levels, you're going to have some of that. That's kind of a natural gaming experience. And for some people, they enjoy that, right? Like, there are some times I like some good trash talk. I really do. And so that exists. But World of Warcraft is massive. It is huge. The player base is vast. And your experiences in WoW really are shaped by what you create around you. Like, you're in control of that. Like, Chicken, I think you and I, we have an amazing community around us. Like, our community is, I would say objectively the best community in all of World of Warcraft. But
that's good. Yeah.
but that's something that you develop. You pull those people around you, or you find a space that you love, and you find a community that you love, and then you step and go, okay, I don't just love this community. I'm not just going to pull from it. I'm not just going to say, okay, I'm going to drain the resources of this community, but I want to pour into it. I want to help people out. I want to create experiences for people. It's a give and take, right? Like, you can't go in and just be like, all right, I need them to do all this for me. Your guild master is not a game dev. I mean, they might be, but they're not a game dev for you, right? Like, they're not sitting there going like, oh, it's my job. I'm paid to make sure little Timmy here has the best WoW experience of all time, and I got to cater to his every whim, right? Like, no, your guild master is another person who's a player who wants to have fun playing the game. So as they're working to build this guild, what can you do? You don't even have to be an officer, but what can you do to create a better experience in your community? And that's how you have a good community around you. That's how you find players who are fun and engaging and that you enjoy being with. You create that. That's part of the game. Part of the game is creating your social space.
Yeah. And, hey, it is an MMO.
It is an MMO.
How many times have I said that?
Yeah, that's true.
At least twice.
But that's so true, right? Like, it's like, it is. Do you want good gear? Well, it's an MMO, right? Like, do the MMO things, and that's how you get the really good gear. Hey, do you want a challenge? It's an MMO. Do the MMO things. Part of the challenge is coordinating with other players. Once you take that out of the equation, you can still have challenge content, but it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be as rewarding. Look at delves, dude. Delves are cool, but like, listen, I was memeing just to prove. I think I Snapchatted you earlier this week. I was like memeing in like a +11 delve because I was like, I just want to prove that like these aren't that hard. But I'm doing so on a blood DK, right? If any like holy priests are listening, right, you're probably like, what? No,
forget this guy,
right? Like, that sounds like the worst experience of all time ever. I'm over here coughing because I'm still a little congested from being sick, but right, like, challenge, like the real challenge of WoW and the real balance of WoW is other players. It's an MMO, and we'll probably say that 1,000 times on this podcast.
It's an MMO. No, that should be our new tagline.
Yep,
for the podcast. Anyways, yeah. So, did you get anything else done in game this week? I know you said you were running some more 10s on your Brewmaster.
Yeah, dude, I've just been having fun playing Brewmaster. It's a unique challenge. It's very different to me than playing Blood DK. Because when I play Blood DK, right, like, it's all about kind of like I'm taking damage, I'm healing myself up, and I'm parrying as much as I can, right? So, like, My two things I'm always thinking about on Blood DK is like, how can I get Dancing Rune Weapon back up for big pulls? And then how can I get Runic Power to like Death Strike and heal myself? Those are my two thoughts always going through my head. Cut this cooldown down on my Dancing Rune Weapon, build up Runic Power. Which is fun, and it's gameplay I really enjoy. I love DK. I'll probably still go back and main DK next season, right? Like I always think in my head like, oh, maybe I'll main a different tank next season, and then I never do. Never do. Maybe.
Why would you?
I'm good at it, right? Like it's what I'm good at, and I like showing up to raid night, being good. However, I've been playing Brew right now, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a change, though. I'm way more reliant on my healer. When I'm finding with Brew, and I don't know if this is totally accurate. If anybody's listening, you're like, oh, swag, that's so wrong. That's terrible information. Let me know. Comment. Let me know. I want to get better. I've been like trying to get all the advice I can for Brew. But with Brew, I find that it's much more about like, okay, how much can I stagger? How much can I hold my stagger? And just like, it's really about slowing down my damage intake and then allowing my healers to top me off, which is a way different experience. I'm not used to being very reliant on my healers. And now it makes me very reliant on my healers. And I don't know if that's gameplay that I love. I would say, Monk is probably one of the most healer reliant tank specs. So going from Blood DK to Brewmaster Monk is a hard shift in that reliance level. Because I play Pally a lot, Holy Pally, and that's not Holy Prot Pally, and that's different because I can just wog myself or something and heal up. And so it's just different. But it's I'm having a lot of fun playing Brew. It's just a whole different spec. There's just it allows me to play the role in the game I love, which is tank, but play that role in just a different way, right? Like, okay, well, I can't just death grip everything to me, so how do I aggro it all, right? Like, I can't slappy hands, so can I like throw down this Ring of Peace and just bump them my way a little bit, right? Use my statue to pull some aggro and then taunt my statue. Just finding different ways. It creates its own challenges, but then it also has its own like eases, right? Like big tank busters don't hit Brew the same way they hit Blood DK, right? Like on Blood DK, every time I get a tank buster, my health is just like woo. Like I almost die every tank buster, and then I'm just death striking it back. And sometimes I do. Sometimes you'll see me on DK just get wrecked. Like I pull and I die. I don't know if I've ever died on pool with a Brewmaster Monk. Just because of the way stagger works, those big crazy hits are just slowed down. Again, it gives your healer time to heal you back up, so your health isn't like boinging like it would on the Blood DK.
Yeah,
but it's been fun.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, one of these days, and I know I'm like, I should just enjoy. What's it called more than I do Boomkin more than I do, because it's kind of on brand, playing Boomkin, playing Chicken, because I know you definitely play Warlock, and I'm like, Swag's on brand, I gotta stick on brand.
Dude, I joke about it sometimes, like maybe I'll finally start playing Warlock, so people be like, oh, Swaglock, he plays a Warlock. It's not where my name comes from. I will say my first ever WoW character was a Warlock, but that has nothing to do with my like actual like username.
With your it's just more of a meme than anything. But I've really just kind of wanted to play Monk again, and I think I'm gonna just keep leveling. I gotta level up my Monk at some point to 80.
Okay.
And I'll probably just main that.
How many 80s do you have right now?
It again. Just two. Sorry, I only have the what's it called?
Yeah, but
the DK.
Okay, so that's a 10% buff. Plus, if you do it right now during the anniversary, it's another 10%, maybe 20% if you do the extra stuff, right? So like,
that's true.
You could get like a 30%, I think, total buff if you hurry up. So kind of worth.
I mean, there's time walking every once in a while. The problem with the time walking right now, and I was going to do some the other day, but it's classic time walking, and I got into a dungeon and there was like 8 bosses, and I was like, nope. And I just left. Classic... I felt so bad, but I was like, I'm not about to sit here for like 30 minutes to do time walking. Like,
so classic time walking dungeons are interesting because you'll go in and there'll be like 8 bosses on the map, but only 2 of them do you actually have to kill for the for the dungeon accomplishment to leave the dungeon. So they're actually not too bad. Some of them you can like just speed through because you just like skip most of the dungeon and kill the 2 bosses that need to be killed. Some others might not be as much like that. I don't really know. I haven't done a ton of them. The one thing I have found though is that I have found that players going into classic dungeons definitely don't know them, and they're not linear like modern dungeons are linear.
No,
and
they're
so
not. No.
A lot of players, myself included, at times where I'm like trying to remember, like, okay, how does this dungeon go again? I'm like trying to remember which way I'm supposed to go, and I know there's like a puzzle I have to do or some type of Legend of Zelda style like discovery. And when I'm with other groups, especially if someone else is tanking and I'm like leveling a DPS or leveling a healer, I'm just like, what are we doing? Where are you guys going?
I'm at your mercy, yeah.
I'm like trying to ping things like, no, over here, go over here.
Yeah, right.
Because people get lost in them pretty easily. But it does raise a question too of like, man, I was talking to someone, I think yesterday while live streaming on Twitch about leveling dungeons, and they're trying to learn how to tank. They want to get better at tanking, and they've been practicing tanking, and they're leveling up a bear tank at the moment. And they said that they're just having a lot of trouble because people were getting frustrated with them in dungeons, and they're trying to figure out why are people getting frustrated, like what am I doing wrong? And they're walking me through like their opening rotation, what their thoughts are. I was like, all of that sounds pretty good. It sounds like you at least know how to open up combat, you know how to pull aggro. Like, it sounds like the tanking side of what you're doing is correct. The problem is there's a leader side of tanking that they're probably missing, right? Which isn't
kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's not a written part of the role, right? You're not going to find it writing anywhere in game documents, but you are the pace setter for the dungeon. And when people do time walking, just like you said, right? You went into the dungeon, you saw, oh, I don't want to deal with this nonsense, and left, right? People who are leveling in dungeons just want to get in and get out. They just want to get in and out.
Yeah, they're not there to help you learn. They're gonna like streamline everything. They're like, how can I do this as quick as possible?
Yeah, they're like, and by the way, I'm the same way. When I go in, if I have a tank,
me too.
Bro, I am pulling all the trash onto that first boss. I don't care. And if I die and I wipe and everybody gets mad at me, who cares? It was worth the risk. And part of it's because it's fun that way, right? As the challenge, it can get kind of, admittedly, when you're doing a lot of M+ content, it can get really boring to go into like a leveling dungeon, just do like one pull at a time where your health doesn't go ever go below like 95%.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Okay, this is too slow. This ain't it. And then you have that like level 5 holy, or I guess you have to be level 10, right? Level 10 holy priest in your group who's just like pumping insane damage because they only have one attack and one heal, and nobody's health is going down, so they're just spamming the one attack they have, and so their damage is like 3 times everybody else combined. And he's like, what even, like, what? That's one of my qualms, I think, with leveling dungeons is you in the classic, and leveling dungeons feel like a true dungeon experience. Not quite myth M+ dungeon experience, right? I do like the timer and the challenge of M+. But they feel very similar to what endgame dungeons will feel like. You're kind of taking your time, you're learning, you're going through them. Sometimes you're speeding, like, it depends on what the levels are of your group. But it's an enjoyable experience. But right now, I think leveling dungeons just ain't it. They ain't it at the moment. And wow, and I'm hoping they figure that out.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I feel like we could probably talk about the leveling experience literally for a whole podcast.
We probably have for
the
a
leveling
few podcasts.
Experience is just. Oh yeah, we've definitely talked about it for a little bit, but I honestly feel like we could talk about it for like literally a whole podcast about the leveling experience and how it's bad.
Probably. Maybe one day we'll like mock up some ways we think we could fix it, and then like go through that in a podcast episode.
I easily know how we could fix it. Boom.
Yeah.
Let me go through my 10-step process in a different episode. Just kidding.
That makes sense. 10 steps. Wow.
10 steps. No, it's not 10 steps.
Really thought out.
Anyways, so we're kind of getting to that point in WoW, grinding a little more, leveling some alts, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think there's a couple more leaks for 11.1 because these weren't necessarily actual, from the PTR or things like that. Well, I guess they might have been.
I think PTR.
WoWhead says data mine, so I don't know if that's actually PTR.
Well, they're probably updating some game files in preparation. Yeah.
That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, just updating.
But it looks like
so that eventually when they have to do the full update, it's not as big.
Oh yeah. You're right. So there's just some general updates to Mythic Dungeons. They don't seem like terribly bad, but they don't seem terribly good. It looks like there's just some general trash updates on most of the dungeons.
I think they're terribly bad. Hot take. I think they're horrible.
Really? Well, some of them are bad, right? Not all of them.
It's trending. So we got these updates for M+.
Oh, it's definitely trending bad. I'll give you that. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's like a blanket like, oh, it's just horrible. Everything's terrible.
Yeah, but I think the problem is it's trending in the same direction they've been trending for the last few seasons.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of players after this season, a lot of players were kind of like, oh, awesome. The season was kind of really bad for M+. People weren't enjoying it. People were complaining on stuff. People just weren't doing it, right? They just weren't engaging.
People just weren't
doing other stuff instead. Even though it sucks right now, that's a good thing because Blizzard will see it and they'll make changes. And instead, Blizzard's doubling down on it. They're doubling down on it.
They're like, hey, actually, we're going to make it even more harder to do anything.
Well, yeah, well, that's the problem, right? Is they keep making it tougher and tougher and tougher. So hot take. I don't know if the people who design M+ dungeons actually do M+ dungeons.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think people that develop WoW actually play WoW?
Oh, actually, yes, 100%, 100%. A lot of them love the game. A lot of WoW developers actually love the game. I say it in jest for M+ because it just the changes that they're making just feel so like counter to what people are actually having fun doing.
Yeah. The only reason I ask that is because, I mean, I guess it's a little different because it's like you're playing WoW and you're not like developing like the game, right? But like I think of my own personal experience, and I've said this before, in my personal life, my profession as an engineer, like, I that's what I do day to day. And, I don't come home and like code more things at home because like I already do that for 40 hours a week. Like I don't really want to come home and do that. But I guess it's a little different. Like you're developing a game, you're doing coding, you're not necessarily, I come home and mess around with stuff every once in a while, like, but I don't make stuff, right? So I guess
it depends on what part, right? What part do you work in? Like, right? Customer service is probably easier to like want to play the game than if you've been staring at the design assets all day, right?
Yeah, but that was the notion of people that actually like work on the game. Are they still like playing the game? Like someone that actually would do the coding and updating and run servers and stuff like that, like a Unix designer, Unix software developer, are they actually playing the game, right?
Absolutely. That's a tough question.
You think?
Well, I think a lot of them are. I think a lot of WoW developers actually play the game and enjoy the game.
I'm just, I'm genuinely like curious of your thoughts.
With your comment though, I genuinely would not be surprised if the people making M+ dungeons don't play M+ dungeons. Now, they might be like, oh, but we quality test them, so we know they work. But the problem is, everything they keep doing, it feels like players. Okay, this is how it feels to me. It feels like players hurt the pride of the M+ dungeon developers, and there's some like emotional like battle going on between the M+ designers and the player base, where players will always find the fastest, easiest way to do dungeons, right? And so they'll be like, oh, we can pull these 3 packs, and we can survive this, and we can go do this, and all this will work. And it almost seems like every season it's like, no, that's not how we want you to do it. But that's not how we want you to do it. That's not how we want you to do it. And so in order to combat that, they just make it harder and harder and harder. And I don't think they realize, like, guys, that's not fun. Let me pull 3 packs. Pulling 3 packs is fun. That opening hallway in Stone Vault, when you're like, guys, we're going to lust this. We're sending it like, we're going to do it.
We'll send it, baby.
We're going to do it. Either live or die, That's fun. That's
and
fun.
You die.
Yeah, you die. Right, but you're pulling like 3 packs there, maybe 4. I think it's 3 packs. But that is fun. But for whatever reason, they keep going. And I think every time players find a way to do content in a way that was not how it was designed to be done, I think these Mythic dungeon designers get upset about that. I genuinely think they get upset when players find a way to do content in a way that it wasn't designed to be done. And I think we're seeing that. What?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think we're seeing that in Mechagon, where historically in Mechagon, the first boss, you would kill the one while your group, I think your tank would handle one, and then you would like burn the other one down or something. I'm trying to remember. I can't quite remember off the top of my head.
The tank would handle like the robot
breaking the armor,
and
right? Yeah, you would break the armor with the tank, while the rest of the group handled the other guy. And then once
like the tank one, yeah.
And then once the actual tank looking thing, right?
yeah, right.
So once the group finished up, once the group finished up with the one guy, everybody then came over to where the tank was and helped the tank out in killing that guy.
Yeah.
And it was actually kind of cool. Now, I don't know if that was the way Blizzard intended it to be done, right? Like when they were designing it, they probably weren't like, yeah, your one player is going to run off and take this guy separate. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but part of me feels like it wasn't intended that way. Players found that was actually the best way to do that fight. And then developers were like, well, that's not how we want you to do the fight. Or they're looking at it and they go, well, that's not as hard as it should be, because modern dungeons are harder than that now. Because again, that was a few expansions ago, right? But guys, nobody likes how difficult dungeons are. I mean, M+ is challenge content. It should scale and get harder and harder and harder. But it should be harder in ways that feel like they're good challenges, not stupid challenges. And that's where I think Blizzard struggles right now. Is I think a lot of times they're making dumb challenges. Like, why does every pack need 12 mobs have to be kicked? Like every other spell has to be kicked.
Oh, jeez. Right?
Like, every spell has to be kicked, and then they got rid of stops, right? Yeah, Stonewall, right? And then they get rid of stops, and you're just like, what? Because they don't want you pulling more than one pack. In their mind, they're like, no, this dungeon has to be done with one pack pull at a time. But that's not fun. That's like going one pack at a time. I'll go play Classic. Let me just go play Classic WoW if I want to go pull one pack at a time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I think in my experience, outside of like when I first started getting into Mythic Plus in Shadowlands, I think this is probably the hardest I've ever seen dungeons, by far.
And I will admit, by the way, this is actually probably one of my best seasons in terms of gameplay, right? Like, me as a player, I'm improving a ton. Blizzard, you have to look back and go, oh, everybody, like most people are not enjoying doing dungeons. Like our momentum, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit with the viewer question coming up soon, but dude, momentum this season is like shot right now.
It's bad. Yeah. It's bad. There's like no one on, and like you can attribute some of that to like holiday time. A lot of people take break from gaming and stuff like that, but not this kind of break, man. There's literally like no one on, like no one.
It is.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah. So I don't know. To me, it feels a little tone deaf for Blizzard to be looking at these dungeons and going, how do we add mechanics? How do we make it harder? Now, it is possible, and I want to just clarify, because I'm ranting right now off of data mined information, right? If dungeons next season are great, I will come back and I will happily admit I was wrong. I have no problem. I have no problem being like, yo, Blizzard developers, you guys, brilliant. 10 out of 10 season. I was dumb. I misunderstood. This is data mined information. It's very possible that they looked at that fight and just said, hey, that was a great fight, but we've had that now in 2 different expansions, because we did have Mechagon back in Shadowlands, and they might just be saying, hey, we want to change up some of the fights, not necessarily make them harder, just to make them different, right? The mechanics on that fight, there might be other mechanical changes that actually make it way more doable to have both mobs together all the time. I don't know. I really don't know. So we kind of have to just wait and see what it looks like, right? If it purely just makes it more difficult, I think it's a dumb change. If it just makes it different, I think that's a good change. So we'll have to wait and see. I could be wrong, but overall, looking at like the Rookery, that one looks like they're trying to make it harder. But again, I don't want to overthink any of the dungeons that are from this season already, because none of them were tuned for M+ yet, right? Like all of them were just tuned to be just normal and heroic dungeons that you go through. So they didn't really have any M+ tuning to them to begin with. I think Priory, I think is the name of the other dungeon that we have some information on. I looked through that. They seem to have nerfed a lot, because again, a lot of the trash was pretty bad. So it seems like they nerfed a lot of the trash, which is pretty good. The only thing I didn't see anything relating to those consecrates that go out.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the trash right before the third boss, I think it is. Right before the third boss.
That
trash puts consecrates on the ground, and they do like wild.
Yeah,
damage.
they do.
And that's in like heroic or normal mode, right? I don't even know. I don't even know what mythic would look like. So that's definitely one that has me just maybe a little bit concerned.
Yeah, they're pretty good at tuning those dungeons once they come out to M+. I think you'll find that there'll be, as always, a ton of tuning in weeks 2 and 3, if not like week 4.
Absolutely.
Typically they wait at least like a week, and they're like, is it really that bad? And they're like, okay, yeah, is that bad? We got to do something about it.
I mean, listen, it's good. It's good podcast conversation, right? Like, it's good for us to get worked up and angry over it right now.
Yeah.
But we have, like, to be honest and to be fair, right? Like, if I'm intellectually honest with everybody, we don't really know what they're going to actually look like. This is just some data mined information. I think coming out of the season we're in right now, though, it's hard to have high hopes. We want to have high hopes, but after what they just gave us, it's kind of tough to be like, yeah, you guys know where you're going. I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. Season 2 could be goated, and I could look at Season 3 and be like, heck yeah, they turned it around. Things are going in a good direction, but we will have to wait and find out what that actually looks like.
Yeah, no, you kind of hit the nail on the head with that one. Yeah. I think... we look at numbers and we're like, oh, you got a 100% damage increase. It's like, is it really that bad? Probably not. And the fact that we've, at least for the War Within dungeons, well, actually all of them, we haven't played any of them recently. Yeah, is just kind of like
okay. Okay, you know what I will say though? I will say this. Speaking of damage increases, we have Blizzard. If there's anybody at Blizzard that listens to the podcast, please tell me one person at Blizzard listens to the podcast. Can you guys just tell me, why do you hate tanks? Like, why do you genuinely hate players who play tanks? Like, honest question. Why do you like me? Look at me, Swaglock in the eyes. Why do you hate me? Like, why me? Like, what did I do? Why do you hate? Dude, okay, let me clarify. There is a massive shortage of tanks right now. One of the driving factors, again, makes M+ not fun this season is there's not enough tanks. When I queue a dungeon as a tank player, I get, and I'm not exaggerating here, I get 20 players easily in the queue trying to join my queue, 20 DPS players. If I'm a DPS and I'm looking for a tank, I'm not going to find any tanks getting in my queue. Oh. That is such a disparity. Tanks are not enjoying the game. It's really hard to convince players that they want to tank as their main thing. Some people will dabble with it, for sure. Some people will begrudgingly go into it just to tank for their friends' dungeons. But not a lot of people really... If tanking already kind of sucks, the people on the fringe who would like maybe step into it, definitely aren't going to step into it. And the people like me who love tanking are the only ones still doing it just because they purely love tanking.
Because they enjoy it, yeah.
Or they just absolutely hate waiting in queue as a DPS. Like, Chicken hates waiting in queue as a DPS. But then that also means, Chicken, you're probably not just for fun tanking a lot of dungeons, right? Like, you're probably like, let me just get my portals and I'm out of here. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to sit here and farm. And so they come through and they put out, Blizzard adds more tank busters. Like, they buff the tank busters. They're making they're doubling down on tanking being more challenging. I don't get it. I don't know. And listen, I know you guys don't actually hate me. Today I'm ranting and then I'm apologizing. Wow. It's kind of my thing, right? Like, rant and then apologize. All I want to know though is like, what is the goal? Like, what is your plan? Like, for tanks? Like, genuinely, what do you want for tanks? Like, why not just make tanking easy?
Because it has to be hard, like healing, dude.
Well, let me clarify, because I know DPS is a genuine challenge. Learning your mechanics, learning your rotation, right? Making sure you pop that rotation perfectly, timing your defense as well, using your interrupts. Healing is just as much of a challenge, if not more, incredibly stressful. And yes, if I'm being honest, if I'm being real with you, listen, I don't actually know if tanking's that hard. Tanking has a very high social pressure to it. Yes. But it's not necessarily. Again, I'm the weird one who loves tanking, but most people do not find tanking fun. They don't like the social pressure. They don't like the responsibility. They don't like that their success is dependent upon the healer, right? I mean, as a DPS, you're also dependent upon the healer keeping you alive, but it's a little bit different, right? Like, your role isn't to take damage as a DPS. As a tank, my role is to take damage. Why am I so dependent upon the healer? What even am I? If I'm just there to get punched and have the healer heal me, what is my purpose? I mean, other than game, like, right? It feels like, why not just have a warlock put their Voidwalker out and just have mobs punch the Voidwalker instead and have the healer like I could be an NPC. At that point I could be an NPC. So my question is, why not just make tanking more fun? Why make it like more punishing? And I think maybe in your mind you're like, oh well, as a tank, if your goal is to survive and live, then having that challenge of taking a lot of damage and finding ways to overcome it is the fun part of tanking, right? That would be the assumption. Mm-hmm. Except there's a 15-second punishment for dying. And when your tank dies, everybody dies. If your tank's dead, that's it. But like that is a group wipe. Maybe in some cases it's not. There are moments where it's not the case. But most of the time, if your tank's dead, everybody's dead. All of a sudden now your whole group is massively punished, and you know who they all hate? Mm-hmm. You know who your group hates? The tank. They hate the tank.
Yeah, but I think it comes back to the high risk, high reward kind of thing. I mean, I would hard say that maybe healer is a little bit high risk, high reward, but I don't think DPS is high risk, high reward at all. I think it's basically only tank. Like, it's a high risk, but personally, maybe you get a little more high reward out of it. The
reward would probably be getting into groups, right?
Well, yeah, I guess this season, yeah, the reward is getting into groups. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, it takes a lot of pressure off of when it comes to living and dying, dude. How many times does a DPS die in a dungeon and it's fine? Like, yeah, It might cost you an extra 5 seconds because they got to get back and, outside of the 15 seconds. But, if tank dies, that's probably easily like a 2-minute deficit. Easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a DPS dying might be like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So
not even 30 seconds. Yeah.
I think people just don't want that. I think to be honest, I think you're right. I don't think tanking is hard. I think tanking on the surface is pretty easy. Every role in the game is hard, right? Yeah. It's not that I'm saying, hey, tanking's not hard. Tanking is hard. Healing's hard. DPS is hard. But on the surface, I think tanking is really easy. But I think it comes down to what you just said. People don't want to be hated. They don't want to be like, oh, this tank sucks because they can't survive the tank buster from the big bad guy in Stone Vault. Yep. Even though I'm not getting healed properly or dispelled properly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then, they get greased by the healer that's not even doing the mechanic right, and then they look like
Yeah, why is my survival on the first boss of Stone Vault dependent upon someone else?
Yeah, right. That is kind of that's a little sus.
I don't think how many healers I have annoyed so much when I've literally walked in dungeon and been like, I will not run this dungeon if you don't install this weak aura.
Yeah.
I walk in and I go, if you do not install this weak aura I will not run this dungeon. I've walked out. I've had healers go, nope, I know how to do the mechanic. I said, no, not good enough for me. And I left. And you know why? Because I've had 5 or 6 healers go, oh, I know how to do the mechanic. And then they dispel the debuff the second I get it. The second I get it, it's dispelled. And I see that shield icon pop up for my weak aura. And I'm like, dang it. They did it early.
And then you're like, well, this dungeon's done. Yeah, and that's kind of the problem. And it's kind of sad because you left and they were probably like, well, that guy's a jerk. So I mean, either way, right? It turned out pretty bad for you.
and by the way, like, listen, guys, delete the weak aura as soon as we're done. I don't care. I just need to know it is my responsibility to live. It is my job to live. I am in charge of my own life, and I'm going to make sure I don't die. And part of that is giving you this weak aura, right? Like, and maybe I'm being a little overly serious right now, but I think there's a lot of intangible difficulty with tanks, right? Like, you can talk about the survivability side of things, right? Like, yeah, I'll wipe sometimes, and the actual tanking side of being a tank isn't incredibly hard, but it's not necessarily the most rewarding. And I think that's the problem, right? Like, it's not the most rewarding, because if you And I think that's where those things that make a change. Like, how do you make tanking fun for most players? How do you make tanking fun? If tanking just stays the way it is forever, you know what? At the end of the day, is it the worst thing in the world for me? No, it's not.
No.
Because I get instant access to groups. Groups will invite me at a way lower eye level and a way lower rating than they'll invite anybody else at, right? Everybody else in the group could be like 635 eye level and 3K rating, and I'll walk up with my Brewmaster Monk at like 615 eye level and like 1K rating
every time.
and they'll invite me every time. Why? Because no one else. They got no other options. I'm it, baby. Like, pick me or go home, you know? And, and so, so on one end, I'm like, okay, if I'm being honest, I like tanking. I think tanking's fun. I enjoy it. I don't really hate it. I don't really hate tanking this season, but I do recognize no one else wants to do it. No, I'm weird. Really. I'm weird. I recognize I'm weird. I enjoy it. No one else enjoys it right now. And I know no one else enjoys it because no groups are being formed. They can't find tanks. They're waiting forever. People don't want to wait in queue for 2 hours just to do a 30-minute dungeon. This isn't Disney World.
Yeah, dude, I have no idea how DPS get the rating they get. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you right now, and that is the one spec or the one role, like say I DPS a key, which I rarely, I don't do that often anymore because of what we're talking about. You know, it's hard to find tanks, and you know, it's funny that you mentioned the queuing up thing because I've definitely ran my own key as a DPS, and I haven't had maybe like 3 or 4 people jump in like, you know, 5 minutes, right? And I've listed the same exact key as a tank, and I'll have like 20 people in like 20 seconds.
Yep.
And it's kind of sad.
But they know. They know when they see that tank icon, they go, if I get into that group, I won't have to wait forever.
Yeah. Well, and that comes to the other thing is like if I queue up as a DPS, and I'm kind of curious if other people do that. If you're in the Discord, comment on this in like one of the WoW channels. When I'm queuing up for dungeons as a DPS, like I said, even in the past, I would always do this. And, you know, more recently, I've done this too, just because, like I said, I don't queue up for DPS very often, but more recently I have. I would only queue up for dungeons that either had a tank, B, a healer, or C, both. And I don't think that's like the greatest way of doing it, but it came down to it as like, hey, I don't really want to sit and wait for a tank or healer. And I'm talking even in Dragonflight, Shadowlands, all the above. I don't want to sit and wait for a healer, like, or a tank. Like, I don't want to wait 10 minutes for 2 rolls. No. So I would always, you know, I shouldn't say always, 90% of the time, I would only apply for ones that already had a tank or a healer.
Yeah. And I think one of the problems is a common complaint in World of Warcraft. And also, before I say this, I just want to clarify. For those listening, Chicken is actually an amazing DK DPS. Like, he is actually phenomenal. I love having Chicken DPS in our dungeons. When we're raiding, he's always in the top 3 on our raid team for damage. Phenomenal DPS. Hands down, absolutely excellent. And for him to go, oh, let me just swap to Blood Spec to run dungeons because I don't want to wait in queue.
Yeah, dude.
That now you might be listening and being like, well, see, Chicken's willing to do it, so it can't be that bad. Well, no, he's doing it because it's so bad that people will take him, right? Like, it's so bad that he can't really find a group otherwise. Now, I mean, you're a good DPS, so you could find a group. But when there's 30 DPS queuing up, you don't want to wait until, right?
Oh yeah, dude.
And that's the big problem is you really need 1 tank for every 3 DPS, 1 healer for every 3 DPS. We how many players do we see complain all over the place that you know, WoW's too toxic because people check your rating or people are checking your eye level and you're not getting invited to groups because everybody only wants people who are overgeared for groups. You know why they take people who are overgeared for the dungeons? Because they can. Because when there's 30 DPS queuing up, why not take the top 3?
Oh yeah, why wouldn't you?
Why would you take the bottom 3? Like, are you dumb?
Yeah, and it doesn't even come down to that. It's like, even as a DK, I mean, people look at you and you're like, okay, well, you don't have a party buff, you don't have lust. I mean, you have a B res, I guess, but my pally has a B res, and or my druid has a B res, and it's like, well, okay, and that's even worse, right? It's not even like I'm playing like a mage, and half the time you're going to take a mage or like a shaman just because you kind of have to, right?
Yeah. So what happens though if you make healing and tanking fun, and the player count of healers, the player count of tanks increases, and all of a sudden now, let's say you queue up, you're a DPS, you put your key in, you say, hey, sorry, coughing, I want to do a key. Here's my stone vault plus 10, and you put it in there, and all of a sudden you get 6 damage dealers, 2 tanks, and 2 healers queuing up, right?
Yeah.
And then you go through and you're like, okay, I only need 2 DPS. Now those DPS have a 2 out of 6 chance of being chosen, right? That's
1/3.
Yeah, that's 1/3. You have a 33% chance of being picked for the key that you're in for. That's way better than a 2 out of 30, right? Granted, you're not 30 people
like
aren't queuing up for a DPS's key, right? So let's say it's a tank, right? Because that's the way it works, as you said.
Yeah.
But that's the problem right now is there's such a disparity, right? When you have 30 DPS queuing up for every single tank that's queuing up, there's gonna be 27. There's gonna be 27 damage dealers for every tank.
Yep.
That just is not getting into a key. You're just not getting into one.
Yeah, they're not. Nope. And that's why I think people either kind of bounce around between DPS specs and play what's meta or play what is needed.
Yeah.
And I hate that because it's like, hey, play what you want to play. Like, I've even done that. Like, hey, like, is it even worth playing DK anymore? And hence why I basically tank now outside of raid.
Yeah.
For the most part, unless, I'm running with you. I just can't do it. And it got really bad, and it started because of what's it called? Oh my goodness. What was the Chromie dungeon last season? Oh my goodness. Yeah. The mega dungeon. Whenever they released it, I could not get in any, like, there was no way.
Yeah.
Like I could not get in any of the mega dungeons. Yeah. So I was forced to tank because that was the only way people would accept me in their parties. Or if I started a group, that was the only way that people would join. And it's basically, that's how it is now. Like, it's ridiculous.
It's crazy. And again, I just think Blizzard, if you guys can make tanking more fun for players, and it's weird for me to say it because I enjoy tanking, but if you could just make it more fun, and I don't know exactly what that looks like, maybe make tanks more competitive with damage. Cool, healers might complain that a tank occasionally out DPSs them. Big whoop, whatever. If you have a big problem, play tank. Right? Go play the tank. I don't know what to tell you. Right? Same with healers, by the way. I think when you have to panic stress the whole time to keep your group alive, I don't think that's fun content. I think fun content for WoW is, and this is somebody who doesn't DPS, but fun content for WoW is damage output is priority, and then roll is secondary, right? So as a DPS, your role is DPS, right? So your whole priority is damage, right? And then maybe third is like, hey, interrupting things, making, right, like those types of nonsense.
Like just general
support, right? General support.
General support, yeah, right? That's a good way of putting it.
But then there's tanks, right? Hey, like your primary focus like is just to do damage and then also hold aggro, right? Like you're holding aggro, but like as much damage as you can do while you're holding aggro, go for it, right? Same with healers, right? Like you're doing damage, but then on top of that, like people's health are going down. You just make sure everybody's topped off. Like make sure everybody's good. Make sure everybody's like taken care of. Nobody's dying, right? But the way it is right now is like healing is a panic. Like when you heal high keys, it's so stressful. And I think what's interesting to me, and I've observed, is the people who are most inclined to try healing, the people that I find that are most inclined to like want to main a healer, tend to be more peaceful people. Tend to be people who just want to be supported. They kind of want to. They don't want to be in the competitiveness of trying to do as much damage as possible, and so they're picking this role that they think is going to be a little bit more relaxing in some capacity. And all of a sudden, they just pick the most stressful, in my opinion, the most stressful role in the whole group, right? And if they fail, everybody's going to trash him. How often do you see groups trash their healers? All the time.
Oh, all the time, dude.
All the time.
Maybe not as much in this season because
there aren't any.
Well, that and there's not as many dependencies this season, I think, on the healer. Like in Dragonflight, you know, you had affixes, you had dungeon mechanics.
Healer affixes were the worst.
Oh yeah, dude, healer affixes.
I will say they've done a great job kind of avoiding a lot of that this season. There is the one, right? We've talked about the one that kind of is a healer affix, sort of, but like really, I expect my groups to handle them themselves, and then healers can cover if necessary, one person if needed.
Yep.
But we've talked about that into the ground already. However, I just think, right, if Blizzard could find a way to make players want to play and make them want to play, not because they get a reward, not because you get some augment runes in your bag after a dungeon, but want to play tanks because they genuinely have fun playing tanks. And all of a sudden, I think you're going to shift a lot in World of Warcraft. And you're going to see more people running keys. Right, like part of the reason why people want to run keys is just because they can't get into them. They can't get into them, right? And so all of a sudden, if you can level that out, right, like it's better. Will I lose my tank privilege of getting into every key I apply for? Sure, right? Because now there's gonna be other tanks queuing up for those keys. But if it means that the game's healthier, if it means that more people are getting into dungeons, then it should happen.
Yeah. Yeah, there's tons of things that I think they could do to get people into tanking. Personally, I think they should add more specs into the game that maybe, and we've talked about this, and I think you definitely disagree with me because I think there are cases where people are just like, oh, like I'd try it out for a day. But then I'm always like, you know, hey, I tried out Blood and I really liked it. And that's kind of why I stick with Blood for dungeons outside of like, hey, yeah, it does kind of help me. But I think adding like maybe a few more specs for tank, you know, like maybe a hunter tank where you have like a giant like grizzly bear that you control or whatever. You know, or a healer mage, right? That might add more life to some of the off specs, because I generally would play a spec. I lean on the fence because I do love DK, and I've played every single spec in DK, and I love every single spec differently. Obviously, tanking's one thing. You don't have two tank specs, right? So, obviously it's not much to choose between if I want to tank, but, DPS wise, I like Frost, I like Unholy. They both have different play styles. I like both of the play styles, but, having that option, for like a Warlock, like they can't tank, they don't have the option to tank. They don't have the option to heal. But if someone really loves Warlock, I kind of feel like they should have the I don't want to say privilege, but like maybe even the option to have that role. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they can play Season of Discovery.
Yeah, but come on, dude.
I'm memeing.
I know, but we talked about that, man. That ain't the same. Imagine, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, though, I think people play their role more than they play their class, if that makes sense. Like most players I know are in it for the role, right? Like I have a few. I'm thinking of a few healers in our guild even, where like the only spec they're playing in their class is the healing spec. And even within that, right? Like I can think of some priests we have, right? And they're only playing the one priest spec that they like to play. They're not even playing.
Yeah,
they're not even going back and forth. They're not
switching healer specs. Yeah,
they're not even switching back and forth. But I will see them go and make alts, and their alts are almost always the same, right? So like.
Yeah.
If they make a shaman, it's going to be resto, right? It's rare for me. Occasionally I'll see them maybe make a DPS that they'll dabble on or something. Same with a lot of tanks, right? A lot of tanks I know will just make tanks. Like they just go around making tanks. A lot of DPS I know go around just making DPS. I do think you're right. I do think there are players who stick to a class and go, this is the class I love. And I don't know if it's as much I love this class as much as it is I've already committed so much to this character. I don't want to have to go work on another character. And so I'll just juice everything out of this one that I can get. Everybody's a little bit different. You know me, I play DK. I don't really touch Unholy or Frost ever.
You play tank.
I play tank, right? Like
Right.
I'm playing Brew right now. I got my Prot kind of geared up as well. I have a Druid that I'm dabbling with every once in a while for tanking. I probably need to level up my Demon Hunter at some point. He's the only tank I have right now that I don't think I'm back at max level.
Oh my gosh!
Maybe I'll level him up at some point.
Nerd.
Right, and so
Hey.
I think it's hit or miss. Will it help a little bit? Yeah, but I just don't think it fixes the problem. If that makes sense. I think it might introduce one or two people into tanking. I just don't think it would like fix tanking.
No, I don't think it would fix it. No, but I think they should. The point I'm trying to make is I think they should focus on adding more specs before they focus on adding more classes.
That makes sense. I think that's a different conversation even too, which you might be right on.
Yeah.
Right? Do we need more classes or do we just want more specs? That's a whole.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother one.
I think. Yeah, I think it would it's kind of the two birds with one stone. Obviously, it gives people more options. Like I think of like a freaking hunter that you control, basically like a giant, I don't know, like a giant dinosaur or something that just like tanks for you and you kind of control and tell what to do, right?
Yeah, that'd be hard. I think positional stuff for that would be hard. You'd have to really.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like frontals, right?
Back or something.
I'm thinking like frontals, right? Yeah, something.
Like jump on its back that has like a 2-second cooldown. You can just jump on its back and move it for 2 seconds or 5 seconds. I don't know.
Yeah,
dude, range tank, bro. Don't kill my hopes for range tank one day.
I'm just not. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think you still have to convince me. But anyways, we got to move on topics. We spent a lot of time talking about.
I was gonna say we probably just got to move right to our viewer questions because we got some good viewer questions.
We do. I love how like I'm looking at the show notes, by the way, and I love how every week we always have that like one topic that like takes up a large chunk of time, and it's never in the show notes. It's never in the notes.
It's never. No, it's not even in the main topics. Like we don't even get to the main topics until we're like 45 minutes in.
That's how it works. But we do have some listener questions here. Chicken, you and I can kind of go back and forth on reading them out. But our first question, we got a bunch today. If we don't get to all of them, we will get to them eventually in future episodes.
Yes.
And I just want to say, I love getting listener questions in here. I want even more. I want more. I want so many listener questions that we just can't answer them all on the podcast. That's what I want. So if you're listening and you've got questions about WoW, and these can be honestly any questions for the podcast. It can be questions about World of Warcraft. It can be questions about our opinions on stuff. Share with us ideas. If you have an idea about something that would improve the game, share it with us. Let us dissect that idea. Let us go over that idea. If you maybe disagree with us on something we've talked about, share that. I love being able to interact with people who listen to the podcast and kind of have that conversation. Even if you can't sit on the call with us right now and record with us, just having your question be able to come in allows us to have the opportunity to interact with you in a very real way, or at least real to me kind of way. With that said, first question coming in from A2Bucks, which A2Bucks has been around in our community for a very, very long time, probably like 5 years, I think. What is your favorite memory of the last year, and what are you looking forward to the most this new year? So this is the first podcast after New Year's, and so it's 2025. Chicken, what was your favorite memory from this past year?
First of all, do you actually think A2Bucks listens to the podcast?
I don't know. He's been around forever though, so you got to honor that. And it's a good question. It's a good question. So.
We just gotta clip this one and just send it to him so he can actually listen to it. Yeah. So the past year has been a whirlwind. Every year always is. I think, especially when you have kids, and it just. Spending time with your family, spending time with your kids, watching your kids grow up. If you have kids, you know exactly what I mean. And, that's always a blessing. And I think, this podcast has always been a blessing to me. I love doing this every week. It's, it's kind of sad because, I really look forward to this and I prep for this probably a lot more than you might realize. And it's kind of a little sad, but anyways, doing this content, watching my kid grow up a little bit, doing some stuff around my house, getting stuff ready, for the next year.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes into next year of, having a second child and how that's going to work out, and get some extra time off work due to some parental leave that I'm gracious to have, and
Nice.
Get to spend some more time with the family during that time. So definitely looking forward to that, and just some more time to the family. Adding to the family is always fun. So yeah, and seeing where the podcast takes us, I'm really kind of curious on that, and just maybe some extra side content that we can get into and stuff like that. So yeah, I think genuinely I think 2025 will be probably one of the best years we've had in a while. Personally, I think everyone talks about the last 5 years just being so rough with COVID and everything that's gone on, and just little things, and it's I think last year was kind of over that hill, and now I think we're definitely back into the good stuff and on a good grind. Hopefully, maybe I'm talking a little too soon, but I don't know. We'll see. What about you?
Yeah, man. I mean, to give credit where credit's due, if you're listening, I want you to know that like last year, our guild did like a, hey, what are your New Year's resolutions? What do you want to see this next year? And Chicken's New Year's resolution for 2024 was to start a podcast. And not only that, but I know, like, Chicken, this is not your first foray into podcasts. I know you had started one with a childhood friend of yours as well for a while, and was trying to launch that. And you're having fun doing that, but that kind of fizzled out. And you were asking me for a while, like, Swag, you want to do a podcast? You want to do a podcast? When are we doing that podcast? And like, dude, I'm being honest with you, I would have never started a podcast if you weren't so excited to do it. Not that I'm against it. I love doing this. I love having this time to sit down and record with you. You're like my best friend. So being able to do this to me is a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it. But I think it's your passion, your heart, your excitement for this podcast that really, I think, brings it to life and makes it something that's so enjoyable that we have hundreds of people listen every week, which we're so crazy thankful for.
Crazy.
So I just want to say, first of all, that's amazing. So Chicken, I just want to hype up, what you said with the podcast, that you really put so much work into it. For me, this year has been an interesting one. Maybe I'll get a little sappy. Maybe maybe you can get some swag lore here. Get a little swag lore.
Sap.
Swag sap. Yeah, man, life for me was interesting for a little while. I love my job. I love the people I get to be around for work. I love my friends. I have an amazing family, and I'm so thankful for all of it. But a handful of years ago, I went through a pretty gnarly divorce, and it was rough. It was rough. A bit of trauma involved in it, and just some difficulties that I went through. And so even though like I had all those things around me for the last few years, there's still just like a loneliness. There's like a loneliness that comes with that. And so this past year has been kind of, a year I did not expect, did not anticipate happening at all, dude. At all, bro. I remember, Chicken, you and your wife were like messaging me like once a month at least, maybe once every other week, like, yo, Swag, you gonna start dating? Like, that
was like the end of last year, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna like finally, like, I don't know, man. I was content, like, dude, I didn't need a girlfriend. I had a guild, like, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
I just play World of Warcraft all day, every day.
This guy.
And you know what? And I thought I was pretty content with that. And I was doing content. I was doing a lot of content, and I was kind of just filling my time. And I told myself, like, hey, I know if I find somebody that's worth it, it would be somebody I'm willing to give up a lot of my content for. Because I know dating would take time. I wouldn't be able to do as much. I wouldn't be able to support the guild as much as I was. I wouldn't be able to make all the videos I was making. My streaming would probably slow down. And so in my mind, I was like, it would have to be somebody incredible. Like, it would have to be somebody that just blows my mind. Incredible. In order for me to, like, set these things aside. And lo and behold, this past year, last January, so one year ago from now, I think it'll be next week, I had built up the courage to like ask this girl out for like hot pot, which was kind of maybe an odd first date idea in hindsight, because I had to like pick her up and then drive her like 45 minutes maybe. And so if it was not a good date, that would have been an awkward car ride back. Let me tell you, that would have been such an awkward car ride back. I don't even know what to tell you, right? I asked this girl out for hot pot. We had kind of been lightly talking. What happened is
Chit-chatting,
the Christmas prior to that, I was hanging up lights for work for our Christmas Eve services, and I needed an extra hand. And I was like with some friends and my sister, and I was like, yeah, there's this girl I'm kind of talking to. She's really awesome, but like nothing's happened. And they're like, no, you have to text her. You have to text her. Like, text her. I was like, nah. It's all good. Like, like she lives half an hour away. She's not gonna drive 30 minutes over here to help me hang some Christmas lights. Like, calm down. Well, they convinced me. I texted her. She came over right away, helped hang these Christmas lights. And then I'm like, I gotta ask this girl on a date. I can't not. At this point, I gotta make a move.
Mm-hmm.
And so, asked her on a date. We went out for a hot pot last January. And we just kept going on dates. It just kept happening. And this past month in December, right before Christmas, I proposed. And so my favorite memory of this past year is, getting to know my now best friend and fiance. And sorry, Chicken, I think your best friend's status has been usurped. But
That's kind of funny.
but man, that's been by far my best memory. Just all of that together. It's just been the most incredible experience. Just wildly beautiful. Like, I mean, she is beautiful, but just the relationship is beautiful. And I gotta say, I think the thing I'm looking forward to the most this new year, probably get married.
Yeah.
So looking at June is kind of our guess, and so picking out venues and stuff like that right now, which by the way is mad stressful, bro. Like listen, this is why people elope. It is so stressful.
Dude.
Like looking at your budget and being like,
bro,
I don't think any of this is gonna work, but we'll see, man. We'll have to start that podcast Patreon real fast, so I can pay for this wedding.
Oh, I gotta pay for the wedding with the Patreon. That's funny.
Yeah, but no. So that's my answer to your question.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think last year was, like I said, like the turn of like all the bad years. Like I feel like before was just kind of rough and getting back into things, but I think last year was really just like a good year, and now I think this year is even going to be better.
Oh, absolutely. So, now we got another
especially
question.
In WoW.
Yeah. Well, the further we get from Shadowlands, right?
Yeah, right.
All right. So, anyways,
just for it to come back in time walking.
Another listener question. I keep on saying viewer. Another listener question coming in. It's my streamer habits. If you're from Zillen or Xylan, I never can remember if I pronounce it correctly. But one of our favorite resto shamans here, or I think they play Enhancement now. I don't know. If you're short on topics, maybe talk about participation decreasing, guilds and teams disappearing until next season. It's a long way until season 2 starts and people come back. What do the people who want to still play do in the meantime? So we did kind of answer part of this question, in terms of like, not answer part, but we set the ground, right? Players aren't playing as much right now. Participation's low. A lot of that is M+ content, but raid content is affected as well. And you and I personally know from further dissection with Zillen on Discord that they really want to try and get into more challenge content, right? They've got AOTC, and they're ready to try and push into Mythic. They're ready to maybe start trying to make some sort of push for M+ as well. And they can't find groups. It's really hard to find groups.
Yeah.
What do they do?
Yeah, so one, and I do kind of want to touch on this a tiny bit after this. Just remind me to talk about Blackrock Depths. But it's, they had all, to be honest, this is, I hate saying this because it's kind of hypocritical, but I feel like there was just a little too much content in a short amount of time, and it kind of, I don't know if people got overloaded and they're just like felt like they got too much WoW, and now it's like, okay, now I just need to like take like a hard break. And
but it wasn't paced, right? So like they could do raid, and then they could do Blackrock Depths, and so there's no pacing.
No, it was basically like, and I understand why Blizzard did it. Like we've talked why Blizzard did it. 20th anniversary, they kind of just had to go for it, right? It was like a do or die kind of situation at the end of the day, right? They kind of had to do it or they didn't, right?
Yep.
So, and I think that's why. I think if they would have released Blackrock Depths with 11.7, I think that would have been perfect, or 11.0.7. That would have been perfect. People would have been like, oh, this is great. Like, this is so hype. But they literally released it like right when a lot of guilds were getting AOTC or like still on that grind. And they were basically like, So personally, I think, the other reason why a lot of people aren't playing is just because there's big overload now. There's not much else to do. So, and back to that, does Blackrock's Depths go away this Tuesday? Or is it sticking around until the end of season?
I would gamble because there is reward from it, in terms of like item rewards that are like power related. Sorry, not transmog, but like power related item rewards. I would be surprised if they just got rid of it.
Yeah.
However,
I was just curious.
I also wouldn't be surprised, right? Like I don't know. Yeah. I would think though Blackrock is probably staying through to the end of the season.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured.
It's just content to do. Why get rid of it? But
yeah, if it's not, we'll let you know next week.
We'll let you know next week.
If people care, we'll update next week and say, it's definitely not around.
I mean, you'll probably know before the podcast comes out. By the time podcast comes out, it'll be like a week late to that information. However,
we should have inserted something right at the beginning of the podcast that if you're listening to this, go buy the Brutosaurus mount right now because it might be the last time you get.
Might be. Probably not. They'll probably bring it back. But they probably won't bring it back for a while, though. Maybe not until next year's anniversary.
No, dude. They ain't bringing it back until at least 25.
Did you get the Bruto?
I did. Let's not talk about it.
No, I won't tell your wife. It's a secret. It's a secret.
Anyways, but I think there's two things that you can do in the meantime. I think you can still kind of grind out M+. Unfortunately, I think if you're trying to get into raid, this just is not the time to get into raid. Maybe try to find groups that might be looking for, a raid team for next season. But I think raid for this season is probably done. Unless you're already in like a myth group and you're like trying to pug like the last boss or two, like I think most mythic raid teams are done for the most part. So, you obviously have an M+. There's still a lot of groups going for their portals and Keystone Hero, all that kind of stuff. So getting into those, kind of just running 8s, getting all your gear, leveled up so you can get to 626 or 627, 628, and then you just gotta kind of queue up and get your rotations down, know your dungeons, that kind of stuff. So M+ is still kind of like the end game content, but then I've really dove into professions, and I think if you're really trying to find something to do, I would highly suggest leveling up your alts through professions, specifically herbalism and mining. Just go mine and herb a bunch. You'll level up your alts relatively fast and hold on to those mats until the start of next season because the price for them will skyrocket. That is what I would suggest. If you're trying to look for something to do in WoW, maybe level some alts through professions and just hold on to mats and stuff until next season.
Yeah.
It's a good way to make some quick gold. You could probably make like 100,000 gold.
Yeah.
So
I would add on to what Jake's talking about. There's other stuff to do in the game. So enjoy doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Enjoy doing that stuff. However, I also understand if that's not appealing to you. You might be like me and be like, I have no interest in professions.
Yeah,
I just want to do
professions.
I just want to do challenge content. With that said, M+ is definitely still very active. I know we complain that nobody's doing M+ anymore. That is a little bit of hyperbole. You can still do M+. Jake is still getting his portals.
A lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people are still doing
I'm
M+.
still running it, right? M+ is easier because it's 5-man groups. There's not much of a commitment. Mythic raiding is more of a commitment, right? If you want to get into like a heroic or normal raid team right now, I don't think that would be too crazy hard. I'm sure they still exist.
Oh, no.
Our guild is still dabbling with some heroic at the moment. However, mythic raiding, which I know from further discussion on Discord, is kind of your goal. And mythic raiding is a hard one because it's more of a commitment to the team than heroic or normals, because you have to commit to that 20-man team. And so you only have the flex, right? Like heroic raid teams right now, if their team dropped down to 12 players, whatevs. We'll keep pushing. We'll keep having fun. But a mythic raid team, you can't drop below that 20 number. You can have more. You can't bring them, but you can have more, like sitting on the bench just ready to go if you need to fill in a gap for a week. And because of that, it makes it a little bit tougher. You're going to have a lot less people trying to push mythic rating right now. It's going to be harder to find. What I would suggest doing is putting yourself in a position where the people who are still running mythic, because again, if people are running mythic and numbers are dwindling, that means those groups also still need to hit their 20-man count. So those groups also still need to find people to fill those slots that are opening up as players are starting to take a break. I would suggest making yourself or putting yourself in a position where you're very desirable. I saw in your notes that you had completed AOTC. My two questions I would have for you would be, one, how did you do with AOTC? Not your group. How did you individually do? Pull up your logs. Look at your parses. How were your numbers? How did your numbers stack up? Were you parsing a 5, right? Or were you parsing 85, right? Those things change your desirability. And so if you're giving AOTC, but your group really had to cover your slack, again, I'm saying this without knowing anything about your character. So if it feels like I'm being aggressive towards you, then maybe I'm correct. And if it feels like I'm missing the mark totally, then maybe I am missing the mark totally. However, I would look at your logs. If your group didn't take logs during that fight, and then I would run those bosses again and take logs and see how you perform and stack up to other people who play the same spec that you're playing. I would also, on top of that, I would run M+ and get your rating and your gear as good as you can, right? A lot of people Mythic rating right now have already been farming the first 4 bosses. The first 4 bosses aren't that hard. I would say maybe the first boss is actually probably easier than Mythic Ansorek, right? By a little bit.
Heroic Ansorek?
Heroic Ansorek.
Oh, yeah.
First boss, right, yeah. So they're probably already starting to farm some Mythic gear. Most Mythic raid teams require you to be having not most, but many Mythic raid teams require you to be farming 3 whole 10 key vaults every week, right? So every week your vault needs to have 3 myth track items in it, at least minimum. With I mean, because you also have myth track through raid tier and stuff like that. So with that said, you're competing against a bunch of players who already have a lot of myth track gear on. They're already pretty high eye level. You need to look at your eye level and say, am I comparable, right? Like, it sounds weird, but applying for a Mythic raid team is sometimes kind of like applying for a job. You're gonna interview. They're gonna test you out a little bit. You'll have like a 90-day period to see if you're a good fit or not, or 60-day period. I don't know I haven't had to get a new job in a long time. So the question for you is like, are you a desirable candidate for these Mythic raid teams? That's going to make it harder to get in or not get in. I'm sure it's also hard to even find them, but if you do find them, you want to make sure yourself as desirable as possible. You want them to look at you and be like, oh, this person would be a great fit for our team. And so I would start, if you don't have all your 10s timed on M+, I would start working towards that. Get all your 10s timed on M+. Start collecting gear. Start getting gilded crests to rank your gear up. You want to have solid gear. You want to have solid ranking. Now, obviously, right now too, there are some benefits, right? Because you get the bonus, right? The bonus in raid. What is it now? Like probably like 15% more damage done or something crazy like that. So that helps out. But everybody has that, right? Everybody has that. So that doesn't really put you ahead of anybody. So make sure that you're doing something that makes you better than other people. You want to be better. Be better. And when I say be better, I mean like be better than the other people that want that same spot that you want. Whatever it takes to get there, whatever you have to do to make that happen, make yourself really desirable for that position. And so that way, when you do find that team, they're ready to go. So my advice, if I were to sum it up, start slamming M+, push M+ as high as you can, get your gear, get your rating, and then as soon as you find that M+, or that Mythic raid team, apply, right? And keep it out. But they exist because they need to fill that. For the same reason that groups are falling apart, other groups are desperately looking to fill a hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. That's my advice there. Chicken, do you have anything else you want to add in?
No, I agree with everything.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would just hard press that. Well, I don't want to say people aren't running Mythic, but I think you would find that most. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's still definitely people running Mythic. So yeah, put yourself out there, see what you can do, and just keep pushing.
Absolutely.
Keep pushing as hard as you can.
Absolutely. And I think someone on Discord said this, and I'll echo it. Mythic isn't always that natural progression from Heroic. It's not like, oh, this person got AOTC, let's bring them into Mythic Raid, right? The challenge is a little bit more. Once you're in that group, they're locked into, so they're making a higher commitment to you. So just because you got AOTC, that doesn't mean you should. That doesn't mean you deserve to be in a Mythic Raid team. Make yourself as valuable as possible. Earn that spot well above and beyond, right? Like, be the best one on their roster, and that will go a long way. All right, we got another question coming in from Talwine. Dude, I love Talwine, by the way. I just want to say that this guy has been in our community, I think, for a little while now with the WoW content, and he's just been a huge supporter, such a kind person. So, Tal, if you're listening to the podcast, I just want you to know, every time I see you comment on Discord, I get so excited. You're just such a nice dude, such a nice guy. All right, so his question is this: toys. Does anyone actually use them on a regular basis? I've never used them, and I'm wondering if I'm missing out on something. Happy New Year. Chicken, before you respond, I just want to say real quick, Tal, you have opened up a can of worms with this question. And get ready to experience a whole new side of World of Warcraft.
Really?
Dude, I love toys.
Oh my gosh, this guy. I don't use toys outside of 3.
Okay, I mean, I don't use a ton of them, but I do use them. I collect them. They're fun to collect.
Yeah, they're kind of neat to collect, but I don't. There's a couple that I'll very seldomly use and almost forget about, just because I'm oh, this is cool, the Murloc one that changes you into a Murloc. And then there's some cool ones like that, cosmetic ones, but outside of that, I really only use 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And basically, there's one that is a mailbox. It's from oh my goodness, what is the Minotaur one from Dragonflight? Oh my goodness. What was that faction called?
Minotaur, you mean the Centaurs?
Yeah, what was that?
I don't remember what the
faction called.
It's the Anaran Plane group. I can't remember what the faction's called, but you get the bird, right? Goodness. You get the bird, the mailbox bird.
Yeah, it's a toy that's just a bird that comes down and you can use it as a mailbox.
Yeah.
It's called the Ohana Perch. I don't know, something like that. Yeah. If you want to look it up, it's actually an really easy quest line to do. If you played a lot of Dragonflight, you probably can get it super easily. I use that one, and then there's a couple more. There's an engineering specific one that I use as almost a second Hearthstone. And that's about it, really. Yeah, I don't really use too many of them.
Yeah, I really enjoy toys, but there's toys is a very broad category. A lot of times the toy category is really think of it as here's cool items that we don't really want you to have to take up a lot of bag space for, so we just shove them all into this extra section of the game. That's probably the best way to think of it, because toys can do so many different things. So for example, you wouldn't think of this as a toy necessarily, but different Hearthstone appearances will go into your toys tab, right? So I probably have 6 or 7 different, maybe more, maybe 10 different appearances for my Hearthstone. So all my characters, when they hearth differently, right? It's not the traditional green leafy hands anymore, but I think one of them does the ethereal archway portal-y thing. One of them does the fire blasts from Shadowlands. Or not Shadowlands, from Dragonflight. No, from Dragonflight.
Oh,
one of them does do the Torghast portal though from Shadowlands. So they're all kind of different. They all work different. I think I have one that's a Diablo 4 scroll or something that it holds up.
Really?
And yeah. And that one
that's kind of neat.
Hearthway. So those are that's one. I have a lot of toys that just kind of do silly little things, right? They're just kind of like when I'm standing around with the raid team and we're just kind of waiting. Like, I'm not going to use my toys most of the time when I'm standing in Dornigal, but if I'm like hanging out with the raid team, we're waiting for people to come back, or our raid leaders explaining mechanics, I might just use them just to show them off. Be like, look what I collected.
Yeah.
Look what I found.
Yeah,
Isn't this cool, right? Like, sometimes it's fun just to be like, hey, have you seen this toy before? Let me throw a football at you. Or let me watch it. Look at this cushion I can sit down on. Or look, I got a little duck I can lay down on the ground and color with. And they're just funny. They're just funny, and they're kind of cute to look at. And they can do different things. Then you also have toys that like actively affect you or other players, right? And so you have the ethereal. What's the trans? I don't know. The item that can change your like race, right? There's like an item that like when you run over, it'll like give you like a random race.
Oh, the automatic calibrator or something, recalibrator or something.
Yeah, automatic recalibrator. And or atomic recalibrator thing.
Yes.
And you know what? Our guild loves putting one of those down, and because they have a long cooldown too. But we love putting one down. Everybody runs over and like changes up their race or whatever. It just looks silly and it's fun. And you can do that. Those are cool. You mentioned Chicken, the Murloc one, where you put the orb down and everybody who touches it turns into a Murloc. And you'll still fight in that Murloc form, which is really cool. So you have some that are like that, right? Which are like, hey, they kind of affect people. They give you like an appearance change, or they like put something on you or do something. There's one like that gives you random cloaks. Those are kind of silly and goofy. Usually a lot of toys are just kind of that silly, goofy category. You also have toys like Chicken mentioned that are actually like kind of useful, right? He talked about that one that he kind of uses as a second Hearthstone, the mailbox one. You have the ethereal transmogrifier or something, but you can put down like a guy who lets you transmog anywhere, which is really nice because even if you have the mount for transmogging, when you're like inside at a raid, sometimes you can't mount up. And so that's really nice being able to mount up. And then lastly, you also have and this one's kind of a vague category, but like accomplishment toys or like achievement toys. Now, all toys are kind of like an achievement of like, look how I collected this. I did this quest line or did this thing. But I have a bunch of banners that I've gotten from doing tournament content in World of Warcraft. And those are really fun to put out and show, oh, look, I competed in this tournament. Here's the thing I did. And then other people can put the banners that they have and stuff they have. And so they all... toys all kind of just do a random thing. As you collect them, I would take a look through your toys list, see what does what. You might find things that you just find fun or entertaining or interesting. It really can be enjoyable to play with them. I like them because they're kind of goofy, and I'm a goofy guy, and so it's fun to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Toys, they're fun.
Yep. Sorry, I'm over here trying not to like sneeze. You want to? Yeah. I can read our next question though.
Do you think we have time for the next question?
Great question. I like the next question. I think we do. I think I can be pretty quick. Glocks has two questions related to Mythic rating. I think we're just gonna do one. We're just gonna do one of them, and then we'll wrap up, and we'll probably save the other one for our 25th episode because I think we might bring somebody on who's more familiar with Mythic rating that can answer it more in depth. But this first one, I think I've really thought a bit about it, and I got a interesting take. And so Glock's question is, what if LFR and Mythic rating only awarded cosmetics? Gear would be tuned around normal and heroic. This would fix the issue with gear rewards being all over the place. It would make gear more rewarding because there's less of it, and even one upgrade to gear would be massive. This might be a hot take. So, here's ultimately the issue that arises there. I think you can't really take it from LFR because LFR players are way more reliant on that gear than we realize. I think Chick and I were stunned one time to learn that LFR is the most played game mode in World of Warcraft. Still blows my mind. But
yeah, dude,
I've met enough players at this point that I think I've started to actually believe that it's true. I mean, I know it's true because it's the data we were given.
Oh yeah.
But now I'm like, oh no, that might actually like really like I think I'm believing it. But with that said, so if we take LFR kind of out of that equation because people do use LFR gear, surprisingly, right? And we have to remember what gear is, right? Gear serves two purposes in World of Warcraft. Purpose one is it gives us something to play towards, right? The purpose of gear is to give us that next challenge to play towards, to extend our play time, to give us reason to do more, right? The moment in seasons when people gear really fast, those seasons tend to die really fast. Season longevity is often related, built around how does gearing feel. Now, if gearing feels too slow, then that also feels really negative. It doesn't feel rewarding. It feels almost punishing, and people will leave. So you need gear in this sweet spot where people always feel like that next step is obtainable. At least obtainable if they're willing to put the work in, right? Reasonably put the work in. So the question here, right, is ultimately like, oh wait, I didn't share what the second purpose of gear is. The second purpose of gear is that it naturally nerfs content. So gear naturally makes content easier to do, right? So as you're doing normal raid and you get normal gear, right, or whatever gear drops from that raid becomes easier. And then you move into heroic, and heroic's a challenge again. But as you progress and you get more and more gear, you're naturally nerfing that content for you to pass. I think what's hard is if you say, hey, we're also going to make mythic drop either like just cosmetic gear or extend heroic track gear, so heroic track gear just goes through mythic rating. You're gonna have a really hard time nerfing that content, right? Naturally. You're really only looking at like world first players who are gonna be successful in that content. And I think that's the problem, right? Is you need that gear to naturally nerf that content. And that's where we have that debate all the time of like, oh, should gear be more easy to get? Shouldn't everybody have access to mythic gear, right? Like I pay for this game, I should have myth track gear. The reality is you don't need myth track gear because you're not doing mythic rating. And that's not me being a buzzkill. That's not me being a jerk or a mean person. That's me literally saying myth track gear is intended to nerf myth track gear content, right? Oh, you want to run 12 keys plus 12s plus 14s? Yeah, sure. You're going to need the gear to like kind of push into that. Now, eventually keys are infinite, so like that will, no matter what, will outgear or outrank the gear that you have. But mythic raiding is designed that like, hey, as you mythic raid, the more and more you mythic raid, the more gear you get, the more guildly crests you get, the more you rank that up. Do some mythic dungeons as well. Continue to get that gear. This raid will become easier and easier and easier because you're getting that gear. So I think that's the one piece that you just can't like. I don't think you could have mythic raid without the gear, and I don't think you have mythic gear without the raid.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think you need both. And secondarily, I think if it stops at heroic track, if heroic rating is all that gives gear, you're going to cut down on how many people go into mythic rating by quite a bit. By quite a bit. Right, it's like Chicken and I with portals. Oh, we got all of our portals. All right, I don't want to do anymore. Like I'm done. and the people who care about cosmetics aren't the people who are doing mythic rating.
Oh yeah, they're not going to be the ones. Yeah, it's my point to this was basically like, and you did just say something that also is a big thing, and why I always say like, oh hey, why would I do more than a 10 because I don't get anything out of it, right? Now I might get more crests, but before, like, hey, I don't get a portal from it. Even if I run even if I already have a portal, I still don't get I don't get a rank 3 or a tier, upgraded 3 out of 6 myth track gear from my vault. If I do a 12, right? Yep. I still get that same 623 out of the vault as I do if I do a 10. So a lot of
players
12,
hold
right?
that. A lot of players hold that view. Now, I would say a lot of mythic raiders enjoy the challenge of it, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're going to kill a lot of mythic raid teams to... I think you're punishing mythic raiders when you say, well, there's just no reward. Because the people who are like you, Chicken, they're just going to dip out. And the people who actually like the challenge are going to go, okay, well, now nobody wants... Now, like,
they're not going to have enough
team,
people.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people straddle that line. A lot of people are like, I really love the content, and because I love the content, I'm willing to put the work in to get that gear. And then there's a lot of people who are like, you know what? I don't really care for the content, and I don't really I don't need to push for the gear. I'm content where I'm at. I think the tension point exists for the people who are like, I hate that something exists that's too difficult for me to get. Yeah. And I think making the reward cosmetic only from mythic rating, I think that player would still be upset.
Yeah, they would. Yeah. I mean,
and now they have less of a
would.
chance of getting it because their power level is going to be weaker going in, so they're going to have a harder time getting those cosmetics.
Yeah, they would. They'd almost just have to nerf. Mythic wouldn't be mythic anymore. It'd be like heroic plus.
Yeah, right. They would just it would just be heroic, right? And then heroic would be normal, right? Like they just lower everything to try and accommodate and then rebalance.
Yeah, and even if you set all that aside, if somehow they figured out how to do it, somehow everything worked out, and there still was a mythic, it was easily being able to done or being possible, right? But it gave cosmetics, no myth track gear or whatever. I just don't think people would do it. It's the same reason why I don't try to go get that, Mountain Dew similar motorcycle mount, because I just don't care.
Yeah, I think it's okay. It's okay. It's okay not to have everything. It's okay not to get everything. It's okay not to achieve everything. Play the game at a pace you enjoy. Do the things you enjoy. And if you're not enjoying it, don't do it. Yeah. It's as simple as that. That piece of gear, that item, that achievement, that's not gonna bring you happiness. I hate to say it. That's not gonna, I'm not here to get philosophical with people, but that's not ultimately what's gonna. You're not gonna, once you get that item, you're gonna be like, okay, well, what's next, right? Like, what's the next thing that's gonna make me happy? So just play the parts of the game that you enjoy. Play the parts that are fun to you. So, right, you don't have to, and I think specifically it's with gear, right? Like, you don't have to chase that next eye level all the time, because guess what? In a couple months, it's going to be a whole different eye level, right? Like a whole new gear. So that's going to go away. If you're like, oh no, this motorcycle is the coolest motorcycle ever, and I really don't love doing it, but I'm going to go through it and do the whole process because I really want to get it. Okay, that's different, because once you get it, you can always use it. You'll have it forever. But with gear, you're going to outgear it. And if you're like, well, I really just want the cosmetic, I really want the appearance, give it a couple of years. Wait till next expansion comes out, bring a couple friends, go back in, farm it, right? Like, that's, go farm that gear. It will always be there, available for you to get at some point when you're ready to get it.
Yeah, it'll probably be easier too.
Yeah, I think ultimately though the question stems from the conversation of like, how hard should Myth Trek gear be to get? Should everybody have easy access to Myth Trek gear? And I think that'll be a conversation we probably continue to have for a long time. I think.
Oh yeah, dude.
I think it's hard for a lot of players to see something that they don't have and maybe feel like they can't get it and be frustrated by that.
Yeah.
And I will say, Glocks was the one who asked that question. But I also know from other conversation with Glocks that Glocks does Mythic Raid, right? So like, he's not even, he's in a different category altogether. And he's got another question about Mythic Raiding that we're going to save for, I have a couple friends who are phenomenal Mythic Raiders, cutting edge raiders. We'll probably bring one of them in for our 20th episode and have them help dissect that question with us. But that's all the time we have today for the podcast. We're so thankful that all of you guys were listening today. Please send in your questions. You can do so through Discord. We have a link in the description here for Discord. Jump in there and go to the questions for the pod channel. You can ask them there. You can also click the send us a text button and send in your question. We just always ask that you attach your game, like your player name, to that question so we know what to call you. And my name is Swaglock. We got Chicken with us. I stream on Twitch and post on YouTube. I'll have both those links in the description as well. I'd love if you came and hung out with me on Twitch while I'm streaming. That would be a blast. I would actually genuinely just really love to have you guys hang out. We'll get Chicken streaming soon enough. We'll make it happen. 2025, it's a new year, a new time. But everybody, thank you so much for listening. We're going to wrap this up.
Yep.